Hello, everyone. I'm here with Mary, so you might see her popping in and out. But I'm happy to be here. I have a presentation to keep me on track, and I'm also going to turn on my timer here. Oh, look at the clock. It's 12:22. So I'm Heather Steinhagen. Heather Vaughn is my artist name. I'm an artist of sorts. I'm homegrown from here, which is the traditional and contemporary territory of the Kwalindun and T'an Council, also known as Whitehorse, Yukon. Um, yeah, as Lisa said, my mom is Cree from Cowessess First Nation, and my dad is second generation German Canadian. Um, yeah, what I think that's my intro. Um, let's go through the photos and see. I don't really have a plan, but I have photos and half a plan, and usually that works out. But like I said, I was born and raised in Whitehorse, Yukon. Here I am in my home downtown. And I remember noticing the weather at an early age. My dad was a pilot, and I remember how long the summers felt, and I don't really remember winter being that bad. So that those are happy memories, and um, I guess with winter comes these core memories of Christmas and winter, and yeah, I think it's interesting how the weather really brings up memories of these specific rituals that we have in coordination with what the weather brings to us. Um, yeah, actually, what I really wanted to say was I hope you're noticing the weather outside right now. For us, it's November 9th, and it was raining last night, and that is very strange because I remember my Halloween's being looking like this, having a big parka on and having two costumes, one for inside and one that goes over your winter outfit. I also noticed that the weather really affected my mood later on in life as a teenager. Still happens today. Like I can feel the pressure change just because I'm having a migraine, or my body reacts in a certain way as the weather moves through. Um, and so this is right in front of my downtown house. You can see the clay cliffs there, and I just have solid memories of going to Blackstreet Park and just sitting on the tire swing, closing my eyes and listening to the birds. And it was always the ravens, and I would imagine that I was talking to the ravens. And lots of camping and lots of drives. And yeah, that's my experience growing up in downtown. And so later on in life, as it goes, oh, I'm missing a photo. Maybe it comes along later. But oh yeah, this is to tell you, this is what my almost daily landscape really looked like. And even as a teenager, I would make efforts to go for drives, and it's not uncommon that we just sit by a lake and chat. Lots of camping, something like this. This is a bit more modernized in 2020, but felt really involved in nature. And it wasn't until I moved away from Whitehorse where I found how personal my connection to nature was and how essential it was to my well-being. Um, and like every kid growing up, I really was kind of involved in this tech world. And I found myself kind of moving away from these very sweet, special moments and just getting like more, on the adult path of making computers do things. And my art really reflected a lot of, these technological collaborations. And even so, this is work that I actually did in Nanaimo, and you could see nature just plays such a strong part in my work. And I wasn't really necessarily thinking that that was my art, but it really came about naturally. And I think, Nicole, a lot of our stories are so similar, and I think it's like purely because of the location and the land that we're on and the way that it speaks to us. Another project in art school. This is a bit more political, but we'll just move on. But here is when my paintings really start to reflect this longing, where I'm doing quite well at being a city person, but also there's such a huge part of me always feeling like it's missing something. And I would just crave the parks, but they never really, Montreal is not quite the same as what I'm looking at outside the window right now, where it's just like nature, not manipulated by men or not planned out in this very specific way. Yeah. And I guess I started noticing as I grew up and coming back to Whitehorse, just the changes that were happening in nature. I remember so many cliff swallows, and I don't think I haven't really been seeing any, but we would go canoeing down the river and it'd just be like thousands of cliff swallows around. And and I think I just started to really notice how quick the changes were in terms of weather, how unpredictable they are. And it's even more so now, and it's just getting faster and faster. And where we used to have a reliance on weather, we're becoming a bit more dissociated from that connection. And I think from that, we lose a vital connection in terms of our own intuition and our own caretaker abilities that we kind of are obliged to live by, because we all live on this planet, and there's a limited capacity for the amount of resources that we might use. So this is a project I worked on with Rebecca Manias, and you can see how the weather can really affect the artwork and the installation. And it really had me thinking about, how often do we have to collaborate with the weather in terms of art. And I think in Whitehorse, we've been so lucky because it's been fairly predictable. But now I'm noticing more and more like outdoor events and outdoor certainties are not that certain. And just how I've noticed the shift of wanting nature to now understanding I'm a part of nature and that I'm the one to build those connections. These are random photos. Oh, that's a COVID little guy. I think I'm also thinking about how diseases are starting to come up more and more, and how we're stepping away from like herbal medicine or ancestral medicine, and just wondering like the traditional knowledge, can it support these quick changes? Can it support or reinforce or reignite these connections that we have to the land? And this is just another case of like the predictable weather. Like, how lucky am I just to wake up one morning, see that it's sunny outside, and then be able to walk out the door and paint. And I mean, it's getting harder now, a little bit less predictable. And I mean, the Whitehorse weather has always been kind of hot and cold, on and off, but I don't think to the extent that it has been lately. And I'm wondering, I'm thinking about just my own use of tools. Like, I do paint in acrylic paint, which is plastic, and I'm always like wondering about, these two worlds that I find myself in, like this really acrylic, technological, man-made world, and then just really wanting or to satisfy that craving of walking outside and being outside and just never looking at a screen again. And then I just really wanted to bring all of those worlds together because, if I can collaborate with nature, why can't, we start to unravel those nuances and just bring them to the surface. So you'll find in my work, it kind of gets a bit trippy, but I'm trying to bring in those solid, like physical metaphors and bring it into this more untangible, energetic connection that we might have. So you'll see it kind of reflected in my work where there's no real boundaries or no real lines, and just really immersing myself in the feeling. And it's reflected a lot, I think, in this past project with the digital mentorship. I actually thought I was going to talk about that a little bit more, but I can see I'm slowly running out of time. But yeah, just really starting lately, I think 2020 really helped, same as Nicole, stop and think and start to really investigate what it is I do and why do I do it. And that's when I kind of got to these weird mind spaces, and just exploring this borderlessness that we have in relation to the planet, or that we should have. So here we are on to the digital mentorship project. It was just such a great time to give myself space to think. There was no real goal or real objective. I was just really happy to be observing and witnessing. And at that time, I was, like Nicole, going on daily walks with my dog. And later on in the group, I sort of admitted that I had been doing these tree sculptures of art, like tree arches. And I had only done them in a few very special places, like on trails that I had walked over a course of years and seasons. And then Lisa actually had mentioned that trees like this exist and that they have been known to be trail markers and used within nations to mark special spots. And that just like really got me thinking, because I had found these little hints throughout my practice. And I was curious about that. Why does it keep coming up? How does it come up if I'm not like necessarily connected to, my culture or the teachings within this, but it exists in my history of like the ancestral history. And so I just got really curious about that. And it reminded me of the moment I saw how my doodles looked a lot like the petroglyphs in Alberta, which would be very similar to the landscape. 3 minutes left. Similar to the landscape of perhaps my ancient family. But those clues again are coming up. And I didn't include a photo, but I also sew Cookum dolls. And immediately as I started sewing them, I knew to put herbs in them, which were medicines. So like, these dolls become symbols of protection and yeah, just I think as a memento to help folks. But suddenly with all of these realizations and investigations and being out with nature, listening to the trees and the wind and whatever's out there, my art and doodles become a bit grander. I think, anyone could see that this is, pop icon Sasquatch, but to me, it's like a whole ecosystem, a whole universe that we are all included in. Maybe that made sense. I hope it did. But I'm happy to have shared kind of a bit of like where I come from, how the land and nature influences me, and kind of where I'm going with my practice, or like where I am. And I think in general, the world is like becoming a bit more open So like, I'm not just a painter, I'm not just a fiber artist, but I'm forever curious in deep in digital strategy. And if you want to learn more about the project I have done with the Weather collection, the URL is there. heatherbond.hatch.1/over-time. Otherwise, you can catch me on social media. I barely post, but maybe I will someday soon. Thanks. I think that's all I have.